Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for attending my talk on the Ende language corpus and our archiving practices. The layout of this presentation will begin with an introduction and background to the Ende language community. I will continue with speaking about our archiving practices, specifically utilizing PARADISEC, and elaborate upon the corpus itself, addressing community outcomes of the corpus. Finally, I will conclude and leave time for questions. As a brief introduction, Ende is one of 6 understudied varieties of the Pahoturi River language family and is spoken primarily in the South Fly district of Western Province, Papua New Guinea. The Corpus of Ende and other Pahoturi River languages, also known as LSNG-08, is one of the largest archival collections of auditory and visual language data for the region. As a background, the Ende language is spoken by a small community in southern Papua New Guinea, an area known for its extensive, however unexplored levels of linguistic diversity. The estimated population of the Ende speech community is about 700 and 1,000 people. Other Pahoturi River language varieties include Agob, Iti, Kawam, and Tam. Figure 1 depicts a map of the villages in the South Fly district that have significant Pahoturi River language populations. As you can see, it resembles somewhat of a paw print. To address PARADISEC, the collection is housed in the Pacific and Regional Archive for Digital Sources in Endangered Cultures, also known as PARADISEC. PARADISEC is a digital archive that has a well-established framework for cataloging, digitizing, and preserving digital data. Furthermore, as an open access repository, it easily allows users to find the corpus as well as the linguistic data that is housed in it. Figure 2 shows the landing page for the Ende corpus on the PARADISEC webpage. On the left, you can see the collection ID, the title, and the description, while on the right you see the items in the collection, and each item is given a name via our unique identifying code. We assess our collection in terms of Thieberger and colleagues' best practice methods for archival collections. These criteria specifically analyze language corpora in terms of the material upon which they are based. The criteria can also be defined in terms of accessibility, quality, and quantity, and have resulted in a large amount of data for our collection. Accessibility refers to the corpus being stored in a repository with a commitment to long-term curation and access to primary data and metadata. The data should also be stored in a non-proprietary format that is accessible to multiple users across a public domain and does not require the purchase of any specific software. Quality refers to the assessment of the archive in terms of the nature and amount of information, the structure of the corpus, the quality of metadata, and the nature of linguistic annotations to the primary data, as well as the structural linking of raw data with their annotations. Quantity refers to the evaluation of an archive in terms of the amount of text and the number and diversity of deposited items. Our corpus meets such standards in the following ways. First, it is deposited in an open access repository that is available to multiple user groups and that guarantees long-term and easy accessibility to the collection and data across such groups. Furthermore, each item is given a persistent identifier and citation form that links it to the collection data and metadata. The collection also contains a large amount of background information and descriptive metadata for items and speakers, the information of which is located in the metadata shown for the deposited collection, as well as in supplemental Microsoft XLS spreadsheets. The collection is organized hierarchically through the linking of annotations and primary data to raw data through our naming system. Primary data are also easily accessible and downloadable by users from the initial landing page of the archive. Lastly, data was collected from a diverse range of speakers across various ages, genders, and dialects that was compiled during data collection and has resulted in a high quantity of digital annotations. By meeting such standards, the Ende corpus benefits both the linguistic and local speaker communities by providing a large body of information from which research questions may be asked and answered. The process of archiving ensures that the data is available to Internet users and remains accessible in the same form in which it was originally deposited. As an online corpus, the collection is able to be updated over time as more files are annotated, transcribed, and translated. This leaves a growing digital record that is accessible to speakers and their descendants. However, storing such data in an online format is not without its problems. Online repositories are a valuable resource for online savvy audiences, as they store sets of linguistic data such as recordings, transcriptions, and translations, as well as various forms of cultural data in an easily navigable online format. Their online nature makes them de facto extremely accessible, since anyone with an internet connection can easily access the corpus. However, a shortcoming of online archives is their emphasis on catering only to audiences with internet access. Rural communities, for example, are often limited in technological resources such as computers and reliable internet. This poses a large barrier to language archive use. Thus, a dire question we must ask ourselves is which groups are currently using the technology and which groups will ultimately benefit from it. Archiving is a practice largely shaped by Western logic and methodology, and can often be less user-centered for language communities. As the Ende speaker group has an extremely limited access to the internet, this means that most people on Earth have more access to the corpus than the speaker community itself. The Ende language corpus was built to support outcomes prioritized by both the academic and speaker communities. As a collection of underdocumented linguistic materials, we believe that the corpus has a responsibility towards the language groups whose data are deposited in the archive, and that this responsibility includes addressing the needs of the language community. For these reasons, it's necessary to find ways to facilitate data access to the local community in instances in which internet access may be scarce. The curators of the Ende language corpus sought to overcome this by prioritizing the collection and creation of linguistic materials that were immediately accessible to the community. The Ende Language Committee has put the community at the center of data collection by prioritizing the creation of linguistic materials that are immediately accessible to speakers within the local community. The project emphasized the speaker's desire to document and share their language outside of their village, and the output consisted of linguistic materials used to promote literacy within the Ende community. The current materials include 241 songs, or 8.5 hours, that are included as items within the corpus, and were returned to the community in the form of a physical hymnal. The contents also include 281 narratives that were selected and organized into 5 physical storybooks that were illustrated by community members. The corpus also includes a collection of interviews concerning the community's conversion to Christianity in the 1960s and how Ende life has changed because of this. This story was acted out and filmed by members of a 2018 technology class in the village and resulted in a 30-minute long documentary, which serves as an audio-video representation of this work. These items are safeguarded in the community as a physical representation of the corpus so that speakers can easily access them. Figure 3 shows the cover of 2 storybooks, Pepe Peba and Ende Ekekut Peba. These books were selected and illustrated by community members and serve as a way to leave a visual representation of the corpus within the community. Figure 4 shows a frame of the auto-documentary that depicts life prior to and following the Ende conversion to Christianity and serves as an audio-visual representation of the corpus that is easily accessible to the community. This documentary was created for the youngest generation of the Ende community. In summation, our work, the Corpus of Ende and other Pahoturi River languages, is thoughtfully deposited in an open access repository as a means of ensuring the long-term curation of our collected data. While we recognize that online language archives are not the most efficient means for all audiences, we also sought to put the community at the center of data collection and prioritized creating linguistic materials that would be immediately accessible to speakers in the local community. This has resulted in numerous resources for the speakers and for the community itself that serve as linguistic materials and physical representations for this community at hand. It is our belief that, aside from outputting linguistic resources within the academic field, the design and description of linguistic corpora for understudied languages shares an equal responsibility to create beneficial outcomes for the local community of speakers and to elevate their cultural record. Here are my works cited. Thank you so much for listening to my presentation, and I look forward to all of your questions.